Kemono Friends is weird. Before anything, I want to show you this. Pixiv is one of Japan's largest fan art sites. With the Safe for Work filter on, Final Fantasy has nearly 68,000 results. Evangelion has 75,000. Dragon Ball has 128,000. And Kemono Friends has 161,965 results. Back in 2018, Kemono Friends went from beating out shows like Yuri on Ice, My Hero Academia, and Konosuba for the title of Anime of the Year at the biggest anime festival in the world, only to be nearly forgotten about 1 year later. And in the modern day, it's arguably not even profitable. It's not so much of a fall from grace as it is a nuclear collapse, and despite that, I have no shame in calling this one of my favorite multimedia franchises of all time. I can't get away from it. I tried. Believe me, I wanted nothing to do with this show after watching episode 1, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. It made me happy to watch, and I couldn't even explain why. I tried showing it to other people and they agreed with me. It made them feel happy. And they couldn't explain why either. The only reason they gave was that the show itself was happy to exist, and that joy was infectious. I never would have imagined that a series which tried to avoid dramatic writing could make you care more about its characters than most character-driven dramas. I also would never have guessed that it was created by an absolute superstar of Japanese manga. Kemono Friends is a series that lives in denial of itself, and I love it for that. It was created by a massive conglomerate and its direction was decided by clueless businessmen who didn't even lock in what time of day they wanted the show to air on Japanese television. Yet, it doesn't feel like it was made by a businessman. You watch it and you forget all about the business behind the scenes. Much of the work is created by fans, and the company supports it. Forget that, they asked for it. It's a series about love. It's a series that you shouldn't feel ashamed for loving. Under its seemingly voyeuristic animal girl exterior is a show which somehow isn't voyeuristic at all. It's earnest, and all it wants is for you to be happy. Yet, despite being a franchise which proudly declares itself to be Tanoshi, or happy, pleasant, and fun, Kemono Friends is a series which has a dark shadow cast over it. It's like that quote by Tupac, "Behind every sweet smile, there is a bitter sadness." That's why I'm making this documentary. I have compiled information from more than 100 different sources including interviews, magazine articles, and behind-the-scenes commentaries, all of which will be listed at the end of the video and in the description. I'm making this out of love, because I love Kemono Friends, and I want to explain why. I want to understand the entire history of how a Street Fighter doujinshi artist managed to create 2 franchises which had Japanese families captivated since the turn of the millennium. I am going to tell you in detail how Kemono Friends was born, how it lived with happiness in its heart, and how it nearly died when drama took hold of it. And hopefully, I'll manage to convince you of how one of the most genuine franchises of all time managed to prove that making you smile can be more impactful than any amount of drama. Alright, see this? This is Akuma from Street Fighter. This drawing was published in 1993 in a compilation book by a 22-year-old Mine Yoshizaki. He had been drawing doujinshi, or fan comics, since his teenage years in the 1980s, and he was a student at Nagasaki University. He was a nerd. Street Fighter and Twinbee, a spaceship shooter game from 1985, were evidently his favorites, so much so that he was able to sell compilations of his fan work. Yoshizaki would go on record, saying that drawing doujinshi was a priceless experience, since he had to make and sell everything by himself. This meant that he got to learn how manga is made and distributed firsthand, compared to companies which would have locked him into one specific job role. He wouldn't stay independent forever though, since in the mid-1990s, he would be given the opportunity to spread his wings, while his partner spread his legs. That's right, we're talking about this. Here's the thing, selling doujinshi doesn't pay the bills, and Yoshizaki had to work a day job to make ends meet, and he drew art on the side. This would change when Yoshizaki became the assistant of Katsu-Aki, a manga artist who had only recently found his calling in life. Softcore. Yup. To be fair, Katsu-Aki didn't want to draw smut. In an interview from the 2005 book Carnival, The World of Katsu-Aki, he explains that he first started in the 80s by drawing shoujo manga, or manga targeted at teenage girls, before transitioning to shonen manga targeted at boys when his work didn't sell. When that still didn't pay the bills, he was forced to draw art like this to make ends meet. And what do you know? It worked. He had found his audience. He started drawing a series called Futari Ecchi, a pun on Hitori Ecchi, in December of 1996. What does Hitori Ecchi mean, you ask? Well, it's the type of ecchi you do by yourself, if you catch my drift. It could be called a comedy of errors, detailing two inexperienced young adults trying to enjoy each other's company for the first time, and it's been called a how-to guide combined with a story. Now I know, when you clicked on a video about Kemono Friends, you probably didn't want to hear about smut. Maybe you did. Don't look at me like I know what's in your search history, but please, stick with me, because we're almost out of it. Futari Ecchi, meaning two-person ecchi, was a huge hit. In fact, it's still being published in 2024, and has compiled 90 tankobon volumes. That's a lot of manga. So much manga, in fact, that Katsu-Aki decided he needed some assistance, and one of his choices was mega nerd video game doujinshi artist, Mine Yoshizaki. Since Yoshizaki was working full-time as Katsu-Aki's assistant and couldn't afford to work a separate job and live on his own anymore, he moved into his sensei's studio. Katsu-Aki would set up a home phone line for Yoshizaki and everything. During this time, Yoshizaki was known for going on long walks while his sensei worked all day. A funny anecdote is that Katsu-Aki's car would get filthy since he worked all the time and didn't wash it. So Yoshizaki wrote into the grime, "You pick cars that your assistants can fit in easily, don't you?" "You hit the nail on the head," Katsu-Aki replied. "The van I drive now seats 7. I don't know if I find that funny, but Joe McCulloch sure did when he wrote his article about Carnival. For real though, thank you so much for writing this. You made this research far easier. Now, Yoshizaki could totally have written out this assistant position forever. After all, Futari Ecchi sold more than 29 million copies as of present day. But thank goodness he didn't, because like every artist, he had his own story he wanted to tell. And 3 years later, in 1999, he would start serializing a manga, which would change the world forever. For those of you who are Friends, or Kemono Friends fans, you're about to recognize a name which has been mythologized in the fandom as the villain. Indeed, it's widely accepted that the real-world story of Kemono Friends has a villain. But that villain is also a figure I intend to partially rehabilitate in this video. That's because it all begins and ends with them. This is the god and the devil figure of Mine Yoshizaki's career. He giveth and he taketh away. Everything changed in 1999. That's right, party like the world is about to end, because this is when Mine Yoshizaki began working with Kadokawa. Kadokawa Shoten is a mega multimedia conglomerate founded in 1945. They've worked on tons of things, like the Fate series, Made in Abyss, Mobile Suit Gundam, and Lollipop Chainsaw Massacre. They had their own answer to the famous manga publishing magazine Shonen Jump in their very own Shonen Ace, a magazine targeting smaller properties for which they could handle merchandise and film productions. They liked being hands-on. Mine Yoshizaki would begin serializing his own manga in Shonen Ace in 1999, a little series you may or may not have heard of about an alien frog coming down to Earth to prepare for an invasion and becoming a house pet in the process. It was called Sergeant Keroro, and it has sold more than 14 million copies. It would be made into an anime series spanning 358 episodes, and still has new projects in the works today. I could spend a whole video talking about Sergeant Keroro and its movies and promotions, but all I need to say here is that the series did gangbusters, and Mine Yoshizaki quickly became a famous mangaka because of it. Yoshizaki and Kadokawa were an invincible team. They rode out the success for 15 good years, before something had to change. The Sergeant Keroro anime ended in 2011, and Kadokawa was looking for the next big thing. Conveniently, Kadokawa itself would usher in the next big thing only 2 years later. 2013. What if battleships were anime girls? They asked the question man had been too cowardly to ask. Kantai Collection was released as a free-to-play browser game and dared to imagine a world where World War II battleships were actually anime girls. Okay, now, I know what you're thinking. That must have gotten like 1 million users overnight, right? Boom! You're wrong! 1.5 million, baby. Kantai Collection was so successful that if I look it up, I have to leave safe search on. People loved this series. You play as an admiral who uses Japanese World War II battleships, who are actually moe girls, to fight aliens. It's something, alright, but you can't lie, that is the most insane idea ever. Obviously, Kadokawa wanted to recreate that success, but they had to be clever about it. Don't be too obvious or people will notice, you know? So they did what was logical. They asked their moneymaker, Mine Yoshizaki, to make something with a similar concept, but very specifically, they told him to make it different. And that's exactly what he did. Yoshizaki thought about it for a bit and came up with a drawing. His idea was as clear as it was brilliant. You play as a zookeeper who uses animals, who are actually moe girls, to fight aliens. Genius, everyone said, and they were right. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Ideas like that don't just come out of nowhere. That's right. We're out of the prologue. And finally, Chapter 1. Why Kemono?